My friends, let us now consider the curious and cautionary figure of the witch, a character of darkness and deception, not merely of broomsticks and pointed hats, but of moral and spiritual import. What defines such a being, who thrives in shadows and opposes the light? I shall give you 5 marks to discern her, each a signpost upon the path of wisdom and caution. The witch's lust for power is a defining trait, a force as insatiable as it is destructive. To understand it fully, we must delve beyond the surface of mere ambition and uncover the profound moral and spiritual decay that underpins this hunger for dominion. The lust for power in a witch is not born from a desire to serve or to build, but from a deep-seated need to control, dominate, and often obliterate. It is a craving so consuming that it disregards the well-being of others, the harmony of the world, and even the self-preservation of the soul. Consider the character of the White Witch in the Chronicles of Narnia. Her rule over Narnia is not one of stewardship or care, but of icy oppression. She plunges the land into eternal winter, a symbolic act that reveals the nature of her power. Winter, in this sense, is not merely a season, it is a state of lifelessness, of stagnation, and of the suppression of growth and joy. This perpetual frost is the outward manifestation of her inner tyranny. She seeks to bend the natural order to her will, freezing the world into a state that reflects her own unyielding heart. Such power is not creative but destructive. It does not nurture but stifles, all in service to her insatiable ego. The witch's lust for power often reveals itself through her willingness to do whatever it takes to achieve her ends. There is no boundary too sacred, no law too inviolable, and no moral too binding for her. In The Magician's Nephew, Jadis invokes the deplorable word, a spell of unimaginable destruction, to annihilate her enemies and, in doing so, destroys her entire world. This act is not one of desperation but of pride, a refusal to be bested by others, even if it means total annihilation. Her lust for power blinds her to the catastrophic consequences of her actions. What does it matter if all is lost, so long as she does not lose? This unholy hunger for dominion often leads the witch to view others as mere pawns in her quest for supremacy. She sees people not as individuals with intrinsic value, but as tools to be used or obstacles to be crushed. Edmund, the vulnerable child in The Lion, the Witch, and the Wardrobe, becomes a victim of her manipulative schemes. She offers him Turkish delight as symbol of fleeting pleasure and promises him power, preying on his insecurities and desires. Yet her true intentions are clear. She does not see Edmund as a person, but as a means to an end, a pawn to lure his siblings into her trap. This exploitation is emblematic of her approach to power. Others exist only insofar as they serve her purposes. The witch's pursuit of power is not merely an external act, it is also a reflection of her inner emptiness. At the core of her being is a void, a lack of love, joy, and genuine connection. Power becomes her substitute for these, a counterfeit fulfillment that never truly satisfies. This is why her hunger for dominion is insatiable. No matter how much she conquers, how many she enslaves, or how thoroughly she imposes her will, it is never enough. The emptiness remains, gnawing at her soul, driving her to ever greater acts of cruelty and oppression. Such lust for power is not without its costs. The witch, in her quest to dominate, isolates herself from all that is good and beautiful. Her relationships, if they can be called such, are transactional at best. She cannot truly love, for love requires vulnerability and a willingness to serve others, qualities utterly alien to her nature. Her world becomes a barren and desolate place, mirroring her own spiritual barrenness. The eternal winter of Narnia under the White Witch's rule is not just a punishment for the land's inhabitants, but also a portrait of her own frozen heart. She has achieved dominion, yes, but at the cost of everything that makes life worth living. In many ways, the witch's lust for power is a perversion of a natural human desire, the impulse to lead, to influence, and to create order is not inherently wrong. Indeed, it can be a force for great good. But when this impulse is twisted by pride, fear, or selfishness, it becomes something dark and destructive. The witch represents this perversion in its purest form. She does not seek power to serve others or to bring about a greater good. Her dominion is entirely self-serving, a means of glorifying herself at the expense of all else. It is worth noting, too, that the witch's power is ultimately fragile, for it is built on lies, fear, and oppression. While she may seem invincible, her rule is always precarious. The White Witch, for all her might, is undone not by an army or a greater tyrant, but by the courage, love, and sacrifice of ordinary beings. Her power, though vast, cannot withstand the light of truth and the warmth of genuine affection. This is the great paradox of the witch's lust for power and seeking to dominate all. She ultimately ensures her own downfall. Her strength is her weakness, for it isolates her and blinds her to the true sources of resilience and joy. In conclusion, the witch's lust for power is a cautionary tale, a reminder of the dangers of unchecked ambition and the corrupting influence of pride. It shows us the hollowness of dominion pursued for its own sake and the devastating consequences of placing one's own desires above the good of others. Yet it also offers hope, for it reveals that such power, no matter how great, is ultimately no match for the forces of love, courage, and truth. Let us then be wary of this dark path and strive instead to use whatever influence we have for the service of others and the flourishing of life. Manipulative tongue is one of her most potent and insidious weapons. It is not the blunt force of physical power that she wields, but the subtle and deceptive art of persuasion. Her words are like poisoned honey, sweet to the taste but deadly in their effect. Through her cunning use of language, the witch ensnares her victims, bending their wills and clouding their judgment, often without them realizing the danger until it is too late. To understand the full weight of this trait, we must explore the nature of her manipulations, the tactics she employs, and the devastating impact her words can have. In The Lion, the Witch, and the Wardrobe, the White Witch's interaction with Edmund is a masterclass in manipulation. She does not confront him with threats or force, but instead draws him in with flattery and false promises. She speaks to his insecurities and desires, offering him Turkish delight and the promise of power. These are not mere gifts but calculated tools of manipulation. She preys upon Edmund's longing for recognition and his sense of being overshadowed by his siblings. Her words make him feel special and important, creating a sense of loyalty toward her even as she uses him for her own ends. This is the hallmark of her manipulative tongue. She tells people what they want to hear, but her intentions are anything but benevolent. The witch's skill lies in her ability to weave half-truths and lies into a narrative that appears plausible, even appealing. She rarely tells outright falsehoods, for such statements are easily exposed. Instead, she mixes truth and fiction in a way that blurs the line between reality and deception. In The Magician's Nephew, Jadis, the future White Witch, uses her silver tongue to sway Diggory and Polly. She presents herself as a wronged queen, a victim of circumstances beyond her control. Her story has enough elements of truth to be convincing, but it is twisted to serve her purposes. This blending of truth and falsehood makes her words all the more dangerous, for it is easier to believe a well-crafted lie than an obvious one. The witch's manipulative tongue is not merely a tool for achieving her immediate goals, it is also a means of sowing division and chaos. She uses her words to pit people against one another, exploiting their fears and weaknesses. In The Lion, the Witch, and the Wardrobe, she plants the seed of mistrust between Edmund and his siblings, convincing him that they are his enemies, and that only she can offer him the recognition he craves. This tactic is devastatingly effective, as it isolates Edmund from those who truly care for him and makes him vulnerable to her control. The witch understands that a divided house cannot stand, and she uses her words to fracture relationships and create discord. What makes the witch's manipulative tongue so pernicious is its ability to corrupt not only actions but also thoughts and values. Through her words, she reshapes the way her victims perceive the world and themselves. She convinces them to accept lies as truth, to see evil as good, and to justify their actions in ways that align with her agenda. This is not merely persuasion but a form of moral and intellectual enslavement. Edmund, for example, begins to rationalize his betrayal of his siblings, convincing himself that the witch's promises of power and privilege are worth the cost. He does not realize that he is being manipulated until the consequences of his actions become painfully clear. The witch's manipulative tongue also reveals her profound understanding of human nature. She is an expert at identifying her victims' weaknesses, whether it be pride, greed, fear, or loneliness, and exploiting them to her advantage. She tailors her words to each individual, knowing precisely which buttons to press and which vulnerabilities to exploit. This adaptability makes her a formidable opponent, as she can change her approach to suit the circumstances. Her manipulations are not one-size-fits-all but are carefully crafted for maximum effect. Yet, for all its power, the witch's manipulative tongue is not invincible. Its effectiveness relies on the willingness of her victims to listen and believe. Once the veil of deception is lifted, her words lose their potency. Edmund, for instance, ultimately sees through her lies and recognizes her true nature. This realization is a turning point, for it breaks the spell of her manipulations and allows him to seek redemption. The witch's words, no matter how skillfully crafted, cannot hold sway over those who cling to truth and discernment. The impact of the witch's manipulative tongue extends beyond the individual to the broader community. Her lies create ripples of mistrust and fear that affect everyone around her. By turning people against one another and fostering an atmosphere of suspicion, she undermines the bonds of fellowship and solidarity that are essential for resistance against her tyranny. This is perhaps the most insidious aspect of her manipulation. It spreads like a contagion, infecting not just her immediate victims but the entire fabric of society. In conclusion, the witch's manipulative tongue is a symbol of the destructive power of deceit and the vulnerability of the human heart to carefully crafted lies. It serves as a reminder of the importance of discernment and truth, as well as the dangers of allowing our fears and desires to cloud our judgment. While the witch's words may be powerful, they are ultimately no match for the strength of love, trust, and integrity. By recognizing her manipulations for what they are, we can resist their influence and stand firm in the face of her schemes. Let us then be vigilant against the siren song of deceit, for words, though intangible, can shape the very course of our lives. The witch's hatred of joy and innocence is not merely a dislike or indifference, it is a deep and active loathing, a visceral opposition to all that is pure, vibrant, and life-affirming. This hatred stems from her own inability to experience or comprehend such things, for joy and innocence are born of love, humility, and a heart open to beauty and goodness, all qualities utterly alien to her nature. To the witch, joy is a threat, a force that undermines her dominion, while innocence represents a purity that stands in stark contrast to her corruption. Together, these qualities form a realm she cannot conquer, and so she seeks to destroy them wherever she finds them. In The Lion, the Witch, and the Wardrobe, the White Witch's dominion over Narnia is marked by an eternal winter, a world devoid of springtime, warmth, and renewal. The absence of Christmas during her reign is particularly telling, for Christmas symbolizes joy, hope, and the renewal of the spirit. By suppressing this cherished celebration, the witch ensures that the hearts of Narnians remain heavy and downtrodden. Her hatred of joy is not passive, it is a calculated strategy to rob others of the light that might inspire resistance against her tyranny. The eternal winter is not just a condition of the physical world, but a reflection of her desire to snuff out any spark of happiness that might dare to thrive under her rule. The witch's hatred of joy is further revealed in her treatment of creatures who embody light-heartedness and freedom. In Narnia, beings such as fauns, dryads, and talking animals are natural expressions of joy in the innocence of creation. Yet the witch turns them to stone with her wand, freezing them in lifelessness and robbing them of their essence. Consider the fate of Mr. Tumnus, the gentle and kind faun who is a friend to Lucy. His cheerful nature and his tender care for Lucy represent everything the witch despises. In turning him to stone, she seeks not only to silence him, but to make a chilling example of her power over joy itself. She does not merely punish rebellion, she punishes happiness and goodness wherever they dare to exist. Her hatred of innocence is equally profound, for innocence represents a state of being uncorrupted by the world's darkness, untouched by the cynicism and cruelty that define the witch's character. This is why she finds children, like Lucy and Edmund, so threatening. Children are emblematic of innocence and possess a natural trust, curiosity, and capacity for wonder. These qualities are incomprehensible to the witch and stand as a silent rebuke to her warped nature. Her manipulation of Edmund is particularly illustrative. She preys upon his budding weaknesses, his jealousy, and desire for importance, but she cannot directly confront the unyielding purity of Lucy's heart. Lucy's innocence is like sunlight to the witch's shadow, a force she cannot corrupt and can only seek to extinguish. The witch's hatred of joy and innocence is rooted in her own spiritual emptiness. She cannot experience true joy because she lacks the capacity for love, gratitude, and selflessness, all of which are necessary ingredients for genuine happiness. Her power, her wealth, and her dominion over others bring her no satisfaction, for they are hollow substitutes for the joy that comes from meaningful relationships and the simple pleasures of life. This absence creates a deep bitterness within her, a resentment toward those who possess what she cannot. Rather than seeking to understand or embrace these qualities, she chooses to destroy them, lashing out at the very things that highlight her own deficiency. This hatred extends to the very fabric of life itself. Joy and innocence are signs of vitality, growth, and connection to something greater than oneself. The witch, in contrast, thrives on stagnation, fear, and isolation. Her eternal winter is a metaphor for her own state of being frozen, lifeless, and incapable of change. The blossoming of spring with Aslan's return is a direct challenge to her reign, not just because it marks the end of her physical power, but because it symbolizes the triumph of life and joy over her cold and barren existence. The coming of spring is not merely a change of season, it is a spiritual renewal, a force that the witch cannot tolerate because it represents everything she has sought to suppress. The witch's hatred of joy and innocence also has a broader moral and spiritual dimension. Joy and innocence are reflections of the divine, of a world created with love and infused with purpose. To hate these qualities is, in a sense, to hate creation itself and the Creator who imbued it with meaning. The witch's opposition to joy and innocence is, therefore, more than personal, it is cosmic. Her tyranny in Narnia is not just a political regime, but a rebellion against the natural order, an attempt to impose her own twisted vision of the world upon a creation that defies her. Her hatred is ultimately an expression of her war against the good, the true, and the beautiful. Yet, for all her efforts, the witch cannot fully extinguish joy and innocence. These qualities are resilient, often emerging in the most unlikely places and in the most difficult circumstances. Lucy's unwavering faith in Aslan, the songs and stories shared among the Narnians in secret, and the courage of ordinary creatures all stand as testaments to the enduring power of joy and innocence. The witch's hatred, no matter how intense, is ultimately futile because it is directed against forces that are stronger than she is. Joy and innocence, rooted in love and truth, have a power that no amount of tyranny can fully suppress. In the end, the witch's hatred of joy and innocence reveals not her strength, but her profound weakness. Her inability to comprehend or embrace these qualities leaves her isolated and spiritually impoverished, a figure of great power, but even greater emptiness. Her reign, for all its cruelty, is temporary, for it is built on fear and lies, while joy and innocence are eternal. The witch may seek to destroy these forces, but they are always reborn, springing forth with new life and vitality in defiance of her cold and barren rule. This truth offers a profound hope that even in the darkest winter, the light of joy and the purity of innocence will find a way to break through. The witch's alliance with the forbidden is a defining aspect of her character, revealing the depths to which she is willing to go in her pursuit of power and control. This alignment is not merely a partnership with forces outside the natural order, it is an active rebellion against the boundaries of morality, law, and creation itself. Her willingness to draw upon forbidden powers, no matter how destructive or unnatural, underscores the witch's disregard for the sanctity of life and the balance of the world. Through her alliances, she demonstrates a willingness to sacrifice anything and anyone to achieve her aims, showing that her allegiance is ultimately to herself and her insatiable hunger for dominion. In The Magician's Nephew, we encounter Jadis, who will later become the White Witch, at a critical moment in her story. Here she invokes the deplorable word, a catastrophic spell capable of annihilating all life in her world. This act of destruction is not a desperate last resort but a deliberate choice, a calculated decision to ensure that if she could not rule, no one else would either. The deplorable word is a prime example of the forbidden, a power so destructive, so utterly at odds with the natural order, that its very existence threatens the fabric of creation. By wielding this power, Jadis aligns herself with destruction and chaos, prioritizing her will above the survival of her people and the sanctity of life. Her alliance with such a force reveals her true nature, one who values control over creation, annihilation over compromise, and pride over preservation. The witch's alliance with the forbidden often involves not only the use of dark powers but also the deliberate perversion of natural laws. In The Lion, the Witch, and the Wardrobe, the White Witch's reign is marked by an eternal winter, a suspension of the natural cycles of seasons and life. This act is not merely an exercise of her authority but a blatant defiance of the natural rhythms of the world. Winter is meant to be a season of dormancy, followed by renewal in spring. By halting this cycle, the witch imposes a lifeless stasis that mirrors her own cold, barren heart. Her use of forbidden power to enforce this unnatural state reflects her desire not only to rule but to remake the world in her own image, regardless of the cost to its inhabitants. The witch's alliances often involve beings and entities that exist outside the moral or natural order. In her quest for dominance, she does not hesitate to consort with creatures and forces that others would shun or fear. In Narnia, she commands an army of monstrous beings, giants, werewolves, hags, and other creatures of darkness who share her disdain for goodness and order. These beings are not merely allies but kindred spirits in rebellion against the light. By aligning herself with such creatures, the witch creates a coalition of chaos, a force united not by loyalty or shared purpose, but by mutual hatred for the forces of love and creation. This alliance underscores the witch's isolation from all that is good, as she surrounds herself with those who reflect her own twisted values. Another dimension of the witch's alliance with the forbidden is her use of magic that corrupts and enslaves. Her spells and enchantments are not tools of healing or creation, but instruments of control and destruction. The Turkish delight she offers Edmund is enchanted to create an addictive craving, binding him to her will. This use of forbidden magic is emblematic of her broader approach. She does not seek willing followers, but enslaves those she manipulates. Her magic does not uplift or empower, it degrades and binds. This reflects her fundamental distrust of others and her need to dominate completely, leaving no room for freedom or resistance. The consequences of the witch's alliances with the forbidden are profound and far-reaching. They not only devastate the lives of those under her rule, but also disrupt the very fabric of the world. In Narnia, her eternal winter plunges the land into despair, silencing the songs of the trees, the rivers, and the animals. Her use of forbidden power creates a world where fear reigns and joy is stifled. The natural order, designed to be a harmonious interplay of seasons, creatures, and elements, is corrupted by her influence. This corruption is not just physical but spiritual, as the witch's presence instills a sense of hopelessness and dread that infects even the hearts of the bravest. Yet, for all its seeming strength, the witch's alliance with the forbidden is ultimately a sign of her weakness. She cannot achieve her aims through natural means, nor can she inspire true loyalty or affection. Her reliance on forbidden powers and unnatural allies reveals the hollowness of her position. She must borrow strength from dark and dangerous sources, knowing that these alliances come at a cost. The forces she invokes are not inherently loyal to her, they serve her only as long as it suits their purposes. In the end, these alliances are as fragile as they are destructive, for they are built on a foundation of mutual exploitation rather than trust or love. The witch's alliance with the forbidden also highlights a key moral lesson that power gained through unnatural means is ultimately self-defeating. The forbidden by its nature is unstable and unsustainable. It carries within it the seeds of its own destruction, as it disrupts the balance of the world and invites retaliation from forces greater than itself. The witch's downfall is not merely the result of external opposition, but a consequence of her own choices. By aligning herself with the forbidden, she isolates herself from the sources of true power, love, truth, and the natural order, and sets herself on a path of inevitable ruin. In conclusion, the witch's alliance with the forbidden is a reflection of her character and a testament to the dangers of unchecked ambition and moral corruption. It reveals her willingness to defy natural and divine laws in her quest for dominance, as well as the profound emptiness at the heart of her power. Her alliances bring destruction and despair, but they also expose the fragility of her position, for power built on the forbidden is fleeting and doomed. In the end, the witch's story serves as a warning that the pursuit of power at any cost leads not to triumph, but to isolation, ruin, and ultimate defeat. The witch's icy heart is the essence of her being, shaping her every thought, word, and action. It is a heart frozen not only in temperature but in its very nature, devoid of compassion, empathy, or love. This coldness defines her reign, her relationships, and her ultimate downfall. To understand the witch's icy heart is to understand the chilling force behind her tyranny, the source of her hatred, and the depth of her alienation from all that is warm and life-giving. Her icy heart manifests most tangibly in the eternal winter she casts over Narnia. This unnatural state is a direct extension of her inner coldness, reflecting her inability to tolerate warmth, growth, or renewal. Winter, in the natural world, is a time of dormancy, a pause in the cycle of life that promises the eventual return of spring. But in the witch's hands, winter becomes a weapon of oppression, an unending stasis that denies the very possibility of change or hope. The absence of Christmas during her reign further underscores her cruelty. Christmas is a season of joy, generosity, and light qualities utterly alien to the witch's nature. By ensuring its absence, she not only suppresses joy but seeks to extinguish the very spirit of hope that might inspire rebellion against her rule. Her icy heart is also evident in her relationships, or rather the lack thereof. The witch does not form bonds based on trust, love, or mutual respect. Instead, she surrounds herself with creatures who fear her or share her lust for power. These alliances are not genuine relationships but transactional arrangements, built on a foundation of coercion and self-interest. She has no friends, no confidants, no one to whom she can turn in moments of vulnerability, because she allows no such moments to exist. Her heart is too cold to seek or accept connection. And so she rules alone, isolated by her own inability to feel or give love. Her interactions with others reveal the full extent of her coldness. In The Lion, the Witch, and the Wardrobe, she demonstrates no hesitation in turning creatures to stone, robbing them of life and reducing them to lifeless monuments to her power. This act is not only a punishment but a declaration of her disdain for the vitality and warmth that these beings represent. She does not see them as living, breathing individuals with hopes, dreams, or loved ones. To her, they are merely obstacles to be removed or tools to be used. Her icy heart allows her to commit these acts without a trace of remorse, for she has frozen any capacity for empathy or compassion within herself. The witch's treatment of Edmund provides another window into her frozen nature. When she first encounters him, she uses charm and manipulation to draw him into her web, offering him enchanted Turkish delight and promises of power. On the surface, this might seem like an act of generosity, but it is anything but. Her gifts are poisoned, designed to enslave rather than uplift. Her promises are lies calculated to exploit Edmund's insecurities and desires. There is no warmth or sincerity in her actions, only the cold calculation of a predator. When Edmund eventually outlives his usefulness to her, she shows no hesitation in betraying him, even plotting to kill him to secure her hold on power. Her icy heart makes such betrayals effortless, for she feels no loyalty, no affection, no pang of guilt. The icy heart of the witch is not merely a personal failing, it is a fundamental rejection of the natural order and the divine design of the world. In Narnia, warmth and life are closely tied to the presence of Aslan, the great lion who represents love, sacrifice, and renewal. The witch's coldness is thus not only an emotional or psychological state, but a spiritual condition, a willful rebellion against the warmth and vitality that Aslan embodies. Her eternal winter is a physical manifestation of this rebellion, a denial of the life-giving power that Aslan represents. In opposing him, she positions herself as the antithesis of all that is good and life-affirming. Yet, for all its seeming strength, the witch's icy heart is also her greatest weakness. Her inability to feel love or compassion isolates her, making her vulnerable to forces she cannot understand or counter. When Aslan sacrifices himself for Edmund, the witch is confounded. The concept of selfless love is utterly foreign to her, and she cannot comprehend its power. This lack of understanding proves her undoing, for it blinds her to the deeper truths of the world she seeks to control. Her coldness, which she believes to be her strength, is in fact her greatest limitation, leaving her incapable of grasping the full scope of the forces arrayed against her. The witch's icy heart also leaves her incapable of inspiring true loyalty. Her followers serve her out of fear, not love, and this lack of genuine connection undermines her ability to maintain power. When the tide begins to turn against her, she finds herself increasingly isolated, abandoned by those who see no reason to remain loyal to someone who offers only cruelty and fear. Her inability to foster warmth or connection becomes a fatal flaw, leaving her vulnerable to the forces of love and unity that ultimately triumph over her. In the end, the witch's icy heart is both her defining trait and her ultimate downfall. It is the source of her power, but also the reason she cannot sustain it. Her coldness alienates her from the world, from others, and even from herself, leaving her isolated and ultimately defeated. The warmth of love, sacrifice, and renewal that she seeks to suppress proves stronger than her frozen tyranny, melting the winter she has imposed and restoring the natural order she sought to destroy. Her story serves as a reminder of the emptiness of power without love, the futility of a heart closed to warmth and connection, and the ultimate triumph of light over darkness.